But that moment when you spoke with the police commissioner or the minister of police, and he was screaming at you to shut up. Just tell us sort of what's your perspective on what happened there?
First of all, there must be senior police officials involved. Second of all, there's most likely senior political officials of some kind involved. There's no way that this kingpin just magically disappeared from the shot. And it's a silly example, but the point is that the way that corruption has strengthened its roots and its grip on South Africa has caused for serious and violent crime in general to just flourish and become actually a career path for many people.
And I think most people look at this and conclude that the reason why it's not addressed is because there are some people who are very senior and very powerful, who are probably in government or in the ruling party, who are involved with this. Is this a logical conclusion to make?
It's a very logical conclusion. I know I'm not always popular for saying it directly, but I can tell you now that within the senior ranks of the South African Police Service, there are many very doubtful characters that shouldn't be there. It's one thing to hear a rumor here or there, but if your name or if a name keeps popping up in different discussions on different levels in different, let's call it sectors or departments, then you know something is wrong.
Welcome to the Pioneer Podcast. This is Aaron Struts. And if you live in South Africa, or if you don't live in South Africa, but you know something about South Africa, you would know that safety insecurity is an ongoing issue. There are a lot of concerns about crime levels in South Africa, and more importantly, what can be done to address this problem. And so today with me in studio to discuss this is none other than Ian Cameron. Ian, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron.
It's good to see you. We used to be colleagues a few years ago, and since then you've become a member of parliament. You became chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Police. So how was that journey for you? Are you fulfilling what you think you ought to be doing?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a big adjustment. I think you have to... you have to learn how to communicate slightly differently, and I think what I love about it is you're in the thick of things. So you've got good access to take on specific issues very directly with some of the people that are directly responsible for making certain decisions. The frustrating part sometimes is government is a massive machine, so it takes time. And I struggle with that sometimes. I struggle to be patient with things. But that being said, it's a massive adjustment. It's a big privilege. I also think it takes some time to get used to what your roles and responsibilities actually entail, because I think the public sometimes have a perception, especially with the Police Portfolio Committee, they think that you're almost like a bit of a minister and a police commissioner. They think that you just wave a magic wand and then you fix things. And it's not quite that simple. So it's been an adjustment to do that as well, and to formalize the structure to the point where we now are able to handle certain kinds of complaints, where we also understand who to refer them to and so on and so forth. But so far, so good. Huge learning curve, but I'm enjoying it.
So I have a T-shirt that says "Shut Up" with SHARR.
Me too. I wonder why you have one.
And then it says below that Becky Chelly. So tell us about that, because that moment of yours really went viral. I mean, you've been very active and involved since before that. It's not like that started your career. But that moment when you spoke with the police commissioner or the minister of police, and he was screaming at you to shut up. Just tell us sort of what's your perspective on what happened there.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's not where it all started, and I honestly didn't think that the 2 minutes of that event would have turned out the way that it did. I wasn't going to go there. It was my wife's fault that I was there. She kept on telling me that I should go and listen. I said, I don't like the guy. I don't want to listen to him. And she said, just go. And very weird, on the way there, she sent me, and she doesn't, I think my wife prays for me a lot, but she doesn't necessarily send me a prayer every day. But that day, she sent me a voice note with a prayer, and she's like, I'm praying for you today. And I thought, just, this is weird. Does she know something that I don't? And so anyway, the incident happened completely unplanned. I sat at the back. I wouldn't have said anything. And he was really derogatory to community patrollers, firstly. A lot of ladies, actually, that walk very dangerous streets every single day and night to try and safeguard it, because the state has essentially failed to provide the safety they are meant to provide. And then he spoke in a very derogatory way to some of the Metro Police members because they don't fit into, at that stage, in a national government body. And I thought to myself, so wait a minute, everyone that's busy fulfilling the duty that you're actually meant to ensure is in place, you are now speaking down to, but you're the incapable one, you're the incompetent one. And so that was the reason for speaking up. It completely snowballed, and I think it also hopefully influenced certain people to know that they can speak up, and that they don't necessarily have to speak through a political party, for example. I think a perception is often that that's one of the only remedies that you have, and it's not. At that stage, I was involved with a different civil rights organization called Action Society, and we were overseeing serious violent offences against women and children in Cape Flats communities. And therefore you can speak with a certain authority about those kinds of cases. But yeah, it certainly was quite a dramatic change of trajectory in terms of doing the work that I do.
So if we think about crime in South Africa, we don't need to explain that it's a serious problem. But I think what we can try to understand is, why is it such a serious problem? There are other countries here in Africa where crime isn't nearly as bad as in South Africa. It might be the worst in South Africa. What's your view on the source of the problem?
Yeah, so firstly, without going in a specific order, I think corruption is one of the major reasons. I had such a laugh recently when a so-called illegal mining kingpin managed to escape from a shaft, and everyone speaks of him as though he is a kingpin, and I'm like, illicit mining is a massive cross-border crime. First of all, there must be senior police officials involved. Second of all, there's most likely senior political officials of some kind involved. There's no way that this kingpin just magically disappeared from the shaft. And it's a silly example, but the point is that the way that corruption has strengthened its roots and its grip on South Africa has caused for serious and violent crime in general to just flourish and become actually a career path for many people. And then you've got all the socioeconomic issues as well. And if you look at the social challenges and you realize how many, for example, fatherless or parentless homes there are, then crime becomes a very lucrative option. I mean, if you look at gangsterism, for example, if you speak to a lot of junior or young gangsters of the age of 14 or 15, I like to, in some of the areas in Cape Town, when I walk there or whatever, I go and speak to them and I ask them, but why did you get involved? And the large majority of them, first of all, are actually still children. Second of all, when you speak to them, they say they had to put food on the table for the family. And then third, there's usually some kind of a broken family issue with regards to parents. So I think in a broad sense, those three things, if you look at corruption, socioeconomic issues, and on a very specific local social level, the issue regarding parentless children, it creates a perfect environment for crime to just flourish.
Yeah. Maybe a bigger picture view, but the question then how to address it, because there are different theories. One theory is that you need to have strong, not just a justice system, but people should go to prison. Another theory is that that's too reactive, that you should try to prevent people from becoming criminals in the first place. And there are different approaches. There's a broken window theory. We need to start with small crimes and then it will have an effect on the bigger crimes. What's your broad approach to crime prevention?
So I'm personally not a fan of a very gentle approach, especially to violent criminals. I think that large-scale disruptive operations where you blockade or close off an entire area, you raid the place, you arrest whoever tries to either stop you or is somehow involved with criminal activities, and block by block you should start cleaning up like that. But that's a very practical part of it. I think broadly speaking, the broken window principle is something that definitely does work and it does make an impact. But at the same time, something that's very missing at the moment in South Africa that was meant to be fulfilled by the Hawks is targeting specific kingpins and then dismantling those syndicates that they work for. You know, the Hawks at the moment, I read sometimes they make arrests of people that are making fake driver's licenses. Now, good for them. I'm glad they've been arrested. But that's kind of petty in terms of what the Hawks should be focusing on. They should be figuring out who the Bulgarians, the Colombians, and the Cape Flats bosses are that are working together to bring large shipments of cocaine into the country, along with certain senior cops possibly. That's where they should be focusing. And if you take that capacity and you've got competent prosecutors, then you can ensure that they do get the sentences that they deserve. At the moment, that system is so fragmented and you don't have an integrated or a synchronized approach with the National Prosecuting Authority and the police. They work in silos from each other, and that's why something like the Scorpions is such a fantastic model to actually follow, and that's why we should have something like that. In fact, I would go as far as saying a lot of what the Hawks does you could most likely do within the police. There are many members in the Hawks that never had any kind of specialized training. They were literally transferred from SAPS to the Hawks to perform now specialized duties there.
But it does seem that, you mentioned some of this now, there are some of the bigger crime phenomena or syndicates where, just as a member of the public, it seems very strange that nothing is being done about this. One, you mentioned now some examples, but also, for example, the situation on the northern border at Messina, the situation with illegal tobacco, certain drugs and so forth. And I think most people look at this and conclude that the reason why it's not addressed is because there are some people who are very senior and very powerful, who are probably in government or in the ruling party, who are involved with this. Is this a logical conclusion to make?
It's a very logical conclusion. I know I'm not always popular for saying it directly, but I can tell you now that within the senior ranks of the South African Police Service, there are many very doubtful characters that shouldn't be there. You know, it's one thing to hear a rumor here or there, but if your name or if a name keeps popping up in different discussions on different levels in different, let's call it, sectors or departments, then you know something is wrong. There's no doubt that there has been significant facilitation of certain organized criminal activities in the country by very senior government officials and also very senior police officials. If you go look at reports by the GTOC or the transnational, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and if you read some of their reports, it very clearly indicates to you that not only are we ranked as one of the most corrupt countries in the world, but also in terms of organized crime, government involvement is significant. And I must say, it sounds extremely dark and doom and gloom, but it is magnificent to see over the last few months how certain champions in their departments have started moving on things, and how we've seen a huge increase in the arrest of corrupt police officers, for example. So that is encouraging. I'm afraid we just need to do it much, much quicker because the damage is significant.
And tell me then a bit about the dynamics with Parliament, the parliamentary structures. Is to what extent is the Portfolio Committee able to do something about this? It's a forum where there are talks that are happening, and it's almost a talk shop, so to speak, you could say. But firstly, in terms of the power of the committee, but secondly, in terms of the politics or the internal politics, do you think this is a forum that might be used, or are there some serious barriers?
It's a forum that takes time. That's the one thing that needs to be understood. The crisis is so big in terms of law enforcement and policing, broadly speaking, in South Africa, that we need to prioritize. So we try and do that. That being said, I'm very grateful for most of the members in my committee, regardless of political affiliation. It's very interesting to see that every time we walk into the chamber or into the meeting room or wherever we have a discussion, majority of the time political hats come off, and there's really a focus on doing proper police oversight. In terms of bringing real change, I can give you a few examples. I mean, we recently had the previous head of crime intelligence in the Western Cape sacked for the second time in 6 weeks. Now, you know how bad you are if you get sacked twice by the same place in 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. But they originally revoked his dismissal because of what I believe was political interference. Whether it was, I couldn't confirm, but I think that was the case. And the committee put up such a massive fuss about this that he was dismissed again just a few weeks ago. So that goes to show, and that's just one example, but that goes to show the impact that the committee can have if we approach certain matters the right way. There are other things where we get significant pushback. We've uncovered a lot of corruption at some of the police training academies, and not small money, millions and millions of rands that have been stolen, and those places haven't been audited. And these are the facilities that are meant to be training the cops of tomorrow. Yeah. And we get pushback, and we even get told by the Hawks, for example, that there isn't sufficient evidence to look at bank account statements, yet we know what the initial investigation showed. So those are the types of things where the committee would then really dig in, and we just keep it on the agenda until we're satisfied with the answer. And that's the way that we're going to do it. What has changed, I think, is that especially with the new structure of government, it's not just a rubber stamp. And I think that it does change the way that we look at things, or will look at things in the future.
So you are now in a position where you have much more authority and much more power, to use that word, than you had a few years ago when the minister was screaming at you to shut up. So it's a bit more difficult now to shut you up. But my question then is looking back at that incident, you said part of what led to the screaming match, well, from his side at least, was that he was talking down onto people who were trying to become involved, helping the police. So how do you see that, I want to say, this triangle between the police, the private security, which is bigger than the police, and then civil society or community safety networks and so forth? Yeah. What's the balance there, and what should it be?
So I really miss the civil society approach sometimes, and the reason why I say that before explaining it is that it was a lot easier to attack a certain problem very aggressively and really campaign that very hard. The challenge now is the scope is so broad, and because you work directly with a lot of the people, it's not as simple as the way that I would have approached it previously. So this brings me to the answer that the value of these organizations, civil rights organizations, NGOs, etc., whoever it is, advocating for communities outside of government and outside the private sector, their role is absolutely priceless. The pressure that they put on government, and I can feel it and I can see it when we take on certain issues or when we note certain complaints in the committee, because they hold us accountable as well. So it feels different sitting on the other side now, and now a lot of people think I'm part of the police. So I get sworn at, I get shouted at in meetings. The other day a lady said, "I've given up on you and your police," and I was like, sometimes I also feel that way, but I can't say that to her. But the point is just that I think there's this balance. Flip Base always spoke about the golden triangle of community safety. I like to develop it slightly more and say that the bottom of the triangle should be those community organizations, because that must be the foundation of community safety. And I still feel very strongly about, and I know there are people in Parliament especially that differ from me, that the state should never have the monopoly on your safety. If we ever have that problem, then you go look at serious tyranny, and that's when we see attacks on, for example, firearm legislation and that kind of thing. So it is of incredible importance that that community organizations form that foundation, the state one end of the triangle, and then obviously private sector the other.
Yeah. So how much of the problem would you say is at a senior level, sort of on top, and how much of the problem is at the bottom in terms of local police stations and so forth?
So the problem on the bottom is caused by the incapacity at the top. And I say incapacity because it's beyond, in certain places, it's beyond incompetent. Certain individuals that have been appointed are incapable of even getting to the level where they need to do that job. They shouldn't be in that career whatsoever. Not saying that they can't add value somewhere else, but if I look at the police, for example, sometimes we see people being promoted, and it just astounds me. We recently saw a brigadier being appointed at 28. Now, you know, I've been doing unannounced oversight visits to stations. I speak to members of flying squad who have been in the same rank of sergeant or warrant officer for over 20 years. Imagine if you're 10 or 5 years away from retirement, you've been in your rank for that long, but someone from outside that is politically connected gets appointed in a position of such a high rank, what that does to the morale. And that's where we've got a huge responsibility in questioning certain kinds of appointments. There are too many, exactly, appointments and promotions. And that's obviously what we will do. I'm of the opinion that if we don't clean up SAP's management, we can't expect anything on ground level to change. And that's why I mentioned the crime intelligence boss. We've questioned promotions in the Hawks recently. We're in that process at the moment. Current acting provincial commissioner in Northwest, we're busy questioning a lot of not only disciplinary but other criminal matters surrounding his appointment, etc. We recently did it here in Manenberg in Cape Town. So there are lists of these appointments. Again, it takes time, but those are the ones that we're zooming in on. I think people want things to change quicker. We obviously want that too, but it's not always that simple, which is frustrating.
And so maybe as a final question, what advice do you have for people who want to be involved in some way, driving patrols, for example, who want to help, who want to be part of the solution, but who experience that the value that they can add is not being accepted, or they feel that they're not able to help, but they would like to help? What would you say to people like that?
So to me, the only real direct solution there too is to get involved in your local neighborhood watch, farm watch, or on an AfriForum point of view, to get involved on that side. If it's a SAI from an agricultural point of view, get involved there somehow, or other organized agriculture. If you have a CPF and you don't have a neighborhood watch need necessarily, but the CPF is conducting some of that function, get involved there. Get involved in your local political party branch. People underestimate the influence that can have, not only on local government, but supporting national initiatives. It's been a huge learning curve for me from a political point of view to be exposed to a lot more, political campaigning, etc. And it feels quite awkward. It felt quite awkward, especially in the beginning. Yeah. But the value of it is critically important. And I feel that if people feel that frustration, that is one of the best ways to take it on. Civilians, and I say civilians because people on ground level that really bear the brunt of the challenges in the country, shouldn't underestimate the value of those organizations and bodies and the pressure that it puts on government institutions to act. And the nice thing about the GNU, in my opinion, is so far we have, and I can speak on behalf of the police committee side, we have facilitated and coordinated so many complaints and so many challenges. So I think there is an opportunity for more people to get heard. It might not always happen overnight, but there is a process being followed to try and really clean up.
Yeah. Well, Ian Cameron, thank you very much. And best of luck with your efforts. We're all keeping an eye on that and we'll follow with great interest.
Thank you, Adam.
Great.